It is recording. Okay, so if everybody could mute themselves, that would be very helpful. So just while we're waiting for Fergus to arrive, our sort of lineup today is we have Mark Forrester from 80 Days and Hotel Benchmark, and he's going to be giving us an update from Hotel Benchmark on, in particular, online activity that hotels are experiencing, which is a pretty good indicator of what the national sentiment is and how strong the pent-up demand is, which I think we all know is there. There have been a couple of announcements today in Scotland, which I'm sure the Scots are aware of in terms of further grant funding, which I'm hoping that Fergus will be able to shed more light on when he joins us. But what we might do as we're past the witching hour, I know Fergus has got a Scottish Cabinet meeting today, which is why this meeting was put back to 11 rather than the normal 10 o'clock start. So he may have got a bit tied up in that. So on the basis he hasn't arrived yet, as far as I'm aware, what I might do, Mark, is come to you in the first instance and perhaps ask you to kick off if you are ready, willing, and able. So for the benefit of those that may not know him, Mark, as one of the leading marketing and design agencies in Scotland, specializing in the hospitality sector. That said, he has many clients overseas as well. His client list is extremely blue chip, but he also has hotel interests of his own, which I'm sure he will just touch on in introducing himself. So, Mark, without further ado, if I could hand the baton to you, and perhaps you could give us a bit of an update as to what's happening around the country from an online point of view.
Great, happy to do that. Roddy, can you share, allow me to share my screen?
I certainly can. Right, you should now have control.
All right. Okay, morning, everyone. Lovely to meet you. Roddy, thanks very much for the intro. Yeah, you know, I share your pain. My family have Rufflett's Hotel in St Andrews. Yeah, I can understand both from a hotelier's perspective and obviously an agency's perspective and where we are right now. Roddy, just in terms of timing, what do you want me to do? I mean, I kind of had a 20-25 minute version of this. Do you want me to do a 15-minute version or?
Well, no, I think a 20-minute version is fine. What I would say is if Fergus joins us, bear in mind he's probably got a pretty tight schedule. We, as tricky as it might be, I might need to ask you to pause, let Fergus say his bit, and then perhaps you can pick up again, depending on where you've got to, if that's okay.
Great. Okay, that's fine. That's fine, Roddy. I know I'm the B act today, so that's okay.
I'm glad you know your place.
I know my place. Thanks for the intro. For those that don't know 80 Days, we're based in Edinburgh, digital marketing agency. We support around 400, 500 actually, hotels around the world. Our job is to maximize the web production. So we've created all these services over the years to help create an effective digital channel. And what I really want to talk today is about the learnings that we've had through COVID, because one of the learnings that we clearly see is that digital marketing is becoming even more important than it was pre-COVID. And I'll give you some data to back that up. But just in terms of the background, you know, that's all I wanted to say. I'm going to present some data in a second, and it comes from a sister company of ours, Hotel Benchmark. I encourage you to go online and have a look because it's a free tool for hoteliers. And we put that together because I wish I had £1 for every time I've been asked, what conversion rate should my website be? How much money should I be spending on Google AdWords? So this is like a community that we've put together to help kind of analyze that data. So think of it a little bit like STR, but for your website. 3 things I want to cover today. 1, a trends update. 2, where do we see the opportunity? And 3, just summarizing the top takeaways. I really do want to emphasize the kind of learning side of things right now, because I've certainly learned things over the last 9 months that you know, I hadn't realized. We're all in a situation that we never anticipated. Our business plans never foresaw what was going to happening. So I think all we can do is learn from it, because if we can learn how consumers are behaving, I think we can come out of this a little bit quicker than some of our competition. So Roddy, the trends update, originally, as you know, I was going to chat to you guys early December. And the trends update was actually, you know, it had some green shoots of recovery there, and it was looking quite positive. It's clearly a little bit of a different world, you know, 4 weeks on. So what you're looking at in front of you are a subset of our data set. So this is around about 300 hotels in the UK. And we're looking at their direct production. So the dark line is their direct website production on a daily basis this year versus the light grey line last year. So what does that tell you? It tells you that there was a massive 87% drop actually in bookings coming direct through hotel websites in March. A little bit of a sign of recovery actually through August. This is the whole hotel marketplace. And then we see that again showing some signs of recovery in October, and then dropping off quite significantly. As we all know, we should be experiencing some very strong booking activity right now. We're not seeing that across any of our data sets, maybe aside from Dubai, and that has stopped as well now. That was the whole market. If we look at city centre hotels only, so this is tier 1 cities, London, Birmingham, Edinburgh, etc., we can see that there really wasn't the recovery that we saw in the whole marketplace. And some of you were probably on the call when I presented in August, and we peeled back the layers in a bit more detail and looked at how the individual sectors performed. But it's probably no surprise that for you to hear that the rural hotel sector performed best. And indeed, we have some customers that performed better, will perform better this year, 2020 versus 2019. And if you look at this in more detail, the stronger the brand, the better they did. So your go-to brand where you may have gone with your partner for a long weekend, as you realize that your summer holiday was not going to happen, what we found was that people gravitated towards that brand that they knew, took a week or whatever they could, because some availability was quite scarce. So actually some of the rural sector has actually done quite well. But what I wanted to be able to show you was that we saw quite a positive bounce back over the Christmas period, but things have obviously changed over the last 4 weeks. There's nothing we can do about that. So I think we really need to look at you know, what's the future and what can we learn from what's happened. I'll save you kind of analyzing this chart and just describe it, because I'm sure Roddy will pass it on to you. But what we see during lockdown, so right now, lockdown 3.0, we're seeing some booking activity, but it's booking activity for quite far in advance. What we saw during July, August, and September was a real immediacy to the booking, with 60 or 70% of the bookings being for that month, in some cases on that day. And I know you've had some various updates from OTA Insight, from Aggie and the team, and they presented that data very well. And I kind of liken it to a sieve, you know. It's like the sieve is full of consumers who want to go and travel. And then as soon as there's ability to do that, whether that's the Canary Islands in November, which got cut off, or the Dubai marketplace, which got cut off and looks like it caught Ricky out, but he's surviving by the sounds of it. So the picture you can take from that is that there's a lot of pent up demand, and we can expect quite a strong bounce back. And we've seen a very strong bounce back when people were able to travel and go to rural hotels, and you know, they did that. So I want you to take you now to some of the kind of key takeaways and insights that I found a little bit surprising. So the first is mobile. And we all know that mobile is important in terms of research. 50% plus of traffic comes from mobile, but it's never been viewed as a very productive booking tool. It was always increasing, but bear in mind, these are bookings to your individual independent hotel sites. And what we've seen is this really accelerate during the pandemic. So 37% of all bookings we saw in our data set came from mobile. That's not mobile and tablet, that's just mobile on its own. What do we put that down to? We put that down to the immediacy of people making that decision, sometimes making that decision, you know, over breakfast, not going to the desktop and just using, you know, the mobile to book. So I think that's a kind of learned behavior, and I would expect to see some of this behavior continue post-pandemic as well. So I found that interesting. This is very interesting, and I think it's the most significant thing that I've found during COVID, and the most significant thing I'd like you to take away. And that is that we have seen consumers turn to the direct website during COVID to book. So what you're looking at here is a survey we did in November this year. 78 hotels, 4 and 5 star in the UK. So a reasonable sample size. And what we saw between July and October 2019, roughly 50% split between OTAs and direct. Now, some of you might look at these stats and go, well, hang on, my OTA is a lot higher than that. And that's because there's some quite iconic. Sorry, Roddy, do you want to maybe pause?
Yeah, I'm just trying to see.
Okay.
Sorry, somebody needs to mute. Hold on, I'm just trying to see who it is.
Starter is prawns and prawns.
They're having prawns as a starter.
Yeah, hold on. I can't actually see anybody that's.
I think we've. No.
Hold on. I think I've spotted who it is now.
And then we've got
Okay, you should be good to go, Mark.
Perfect. Thanks. Sorry, it just made it probably easier for everyone.
Yeah.
So some of you may be looking at that and going, well, hang on, I wasn't 50-50. And that's represented the fact there's some quite high-end resorts in this. High-end resorts don't tend to use OTAs as much. The key point is we've seen a 20% shift back to booking direct as a result of the pandemic. What do we put that down to? Two things. One, for the first time in my digital marketing memory, which goes back 20 years, we are not seeing OTAs bid on your keywords. As you know, OTAs bid on hoteliers' keywords as a cheap way to get relevant traffic. They're not doing that during the pandemic for obvious reasons. And secondly, we feel that consumers are trusting the hotel website more if they want information on COVID policies versus a more generic if we want OTA setup. So I'll conclude by talking a little bit more about this, but I think that's really significant. Where do we see opportunity? I think you all know this, but traveling in a post-COVID environment, consumers view the experience that they want very differently. So it's really important that you look at your branding and your position and positioning and make sure that it's current in a post-COVID environment. And I'm not talking here about hygiene and cleanliness. People just expect that. I'm talking about, are you clearly representing your property online? Are your unique selling points really clear? We've seen that our branding and positioning side of the business is busier than it's ever been during the pandemic, as hoteliers have sat back and going, right, I need to reinvent myself. And we're also seeing a number of deflaggings where owners are taking their property out of international brands and creating an independent brand. So that's a trend that I'm seeing as well that backs this up. Audience targeting is so important. Most people know that digital marketing is so targeted nowadays. I could target somebody flying from 50 miles of LaGuardia Airport that has a direct flight to, to Rome or Stansted. So it's really important that you and your agency are staying on top of targeting as we move through the different tiers in the UK. So yesterday, for example, we spent a fair bit of time in the afternoon changing the targeting of our Dubai-based clients, so we're not reaching out to a UK marketplace, which is not going to be booking. So very important that you look at your air corridors for your inbound markets, and you look at the tiers within where you live and your boundary tiers, and advertise only in these areas where, of course, they can actually travel. Mobile, we mentioned before, really needs to be at the heart of your strategy, not from a social perspective, but also from an advertising perspective. So make sure you've got the right budget allocated towards mobile, because unless your ad appears in mobile, like the screenshot you see in front of you, it takes up the whole page of your mobile phone. So you've got no way of being found unless you're advertising on mobile. And we just saw some stats which show that 37%, certainly within our data set, of people are booking online. So that's more important than ever. And this is very interesting. In the same way that we have learned to communicate differently, we're all on Zoom right now, and the same way that we've learned to shop differently, consumers seem to be using search differently during the pandemic, and they're using their mobile phones differently, and they're using local search more to find restaurants near me, hotels that are open near me. So they're using these near me searches in Google that work a totally different way. And that needs to be part of your digital marketing strategy. And this is just showing the peak here of people using their mobiles to find restaurants near me during the Eat Out to Help Out campaign last summer. And lastly, customer engagement, another surprising stat. I appreciate it's very difficult for you to communicate with your customers during lockdown because you're not 100% clear what you want to say. But those customers that have communicated, whether it be in a humorous way, whether it be in a sharing way, compassionate way, they saw a significant lower reduction in engagement with their site, and they bounced back significantly quicker than those customers that just kept quiet. So in conclusion, and I'm happy if the main actor, Roddy, isn't there to to take some questions, but the key takeaways that I have for us all are that whilst it's a little bit doom and gloom at the moment, it is going to bounce back, and you need to be prepared. And I think there's some key things that you can take to make you more prepared. One, really considering the positioning of your hotel. Is it really clear? Does the audience get you? Is it relevant in a post-COVID environment? That's number one. Two, even though it might be difficult, maintain communication and engagement levels with your audience during lockdown. Hopefully this is the last time we will experience a lockdown. Demographic and geographic targeting makes even more sense now as we're moving in and out of different tiers. So why waste money targeting an audience that can't actually physically come and reach you? Mobile bookings are going from strength to strength. I do feel that we're all learning different behaviors during the pandemic. And I feel if you've booked once on mobile and you maybe haven't before, you will continue to book on mobile in the same way we will continue to have many of our meetings, no doubt, on Zoom moving forward. Local search, again, is another learnt behavior that we've changed during the pandemic. And the way people are searching is different. And you need to update your digital strategy to ensure that you are reaching that near me audience. And lastly, and I think most significantly, for the first time in 20 years that I've been in this industry, people are moving back to booking direct. So it's really important for all of us to look at how do we capitalize that? Because if we can save that 20% shift that we've seen, if we can save that on commission moving forward, that's a big win for us all, because it seems that whilst the high street, has lost out to Amazon, it doesn't appear that the independent hotelier has lost out to the OTAs. And I think there's something that we can all take away from that. So Roddy, I think that was, 20 minutes. Let me stop sharing that.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mark. Just a quick update. I have had an email from Fergus's PPS or whatever his formal title is, to say that he will be with us by 11:30, so he will be arriving any minute. Mark, thank you very much for that. Really interesting, a bit gloom and doom, as you say, but I think we all believe that once restrictions do start to lift, whenever that may be, that there is pent-up demand there, but very interesting to see the changes in behavior. A couple of questions, one from Stuart Broster, who asks, do you have any data, the increase in usage of mobile for bookings, is there any data in terms of the age profile? I mean, is it younger people who are using mobile, or do we not have that level of granularity?
We will actually have it in our data set. I just don't have it to hand. But Roddy, I'm quite happy to make a note.
Okay.
And follow up on that.
To that. Okay, well, that would be good. We can circulate whatever the data is showing you. But just following up on that, what should we be doing to capitalize on this shift in terms of the shift to mobile, people making bookings through mobile?
Well, if you take your mobile phone right now or after this meeting, and you put your hotel name into it, you will appreciate that if an OTA is bidding on your name, it takes up the whole screen. So you've got no chance. Whereas in Google on search engine results pages on a laptop or a desktop, you've at least got 2 or 3 listings that appear and then some organic listings. So you should be ensuring that you are invested in mobile and that you are bidding for your brand name, Roddy, at the very least. And some people don't like to bid for the brand name on mobile in the past, because if they click to call, so if they phoned, then you can't track it back because it's not an online booking. But I would say make sure that your digital agency has put budget behind mobile, and that 100% of your impressions for mobile are taken care of by your brand. Okay, thanks, Mark. And another question.
obviously there's this very welcome swing away from the OTA, so the 20% swing back to direct bookings. What more can people be doing to capitalize on that and perhaps even accelerate that move?
Yeah, well, I've been a little surprised by this. I mean, one client said to me, he's a digital marketing manager for a hotel group. And he said to me something that was quite interesting, and I've not really heard it before. He said, budget's no object for me. We've got meeting incentive people that are grounded. Our salespeople can't fly anywhere. The web is even more important now than it was before. So, and it was kind of music to my ears, really. I've not heard that for a while. But I think that just really shows that you should take this opportunity, this downtime, if you want to call it that, to look at your website and to look at, is it robust? Your booking engine technology. Christopher Codrington's on from Navarino here, and he can maybe interject as well. Make sure you've got the right technology behind your website. Make sure that you have your brand right, your messaging right, your content. It's just, I think it's a time to have a fresh look at it. I know it sounds like I've got a vested interest in that, but genuinely, I do encourage you all to look at your web presence and just, is it as good as it could be? And allocate the correct amount of budget towards it, because I think it's massive if we can maintain that shift to direct that we've seen.
Somebody has asked you, what conversion rate should we be looking for from our website? That's okay. A bit of how long's a piece of string, I suspect, but can you give any insight?
Yeah, I can. And again, I encourage you to go to, if you sign your hotel up to Hotel Benchmark, you will get the exact answer for your competitor set. But I'll give you a kind of rough, broad sweep. If you're a 4-star city centre hotel in the UK, the conversion rate of your website, so that's the number of people visiting your website versus actually booking, would be between 1 and 2%. So between 1 in 100 and 1 in 50 users would book. If you are a 5-star resort type of property, it would be roughly 0.5%. The reason being, you might have Michelin restaurant, spa, equestrian, so a room factory, if you want, would have a higher conversion rate. So it's very important that you add context to that and you make sure that you're measuring yourself the same way that you do with STR. It would be a bit crazy to ask, well, what's the average ADR? Well, it's meaningless, right? You need to look at your own competitor set and compare it. So resort properties tend to be about 0.5%. And 4-star city centre between 1 and 2.
Okay, thank you very much. 2 other quick questions. One, do you have any data as to how many people actually book hotels from work or from home?
It's a really good question. No, but what we can do, what's some insight that we've got to that? Sorry, I was just thinking as I speak, that is quite a good question. Time of day, we do know the time of day that people book, and we know the time of day, and what we see is that there's a surge around lunchtime and there's a surge in the evening. And so we could potentially look at that in a little bit more detail, if you know what I mean. But as I say, we do, generally speaking, when we're at work, we're not booking leisure travel. We might be booking business travel. But in our lunch breaks, we will be doing some research, and in the evening, we will be booking.
Okay, thanks, Mark. And one more here. Do you have any split between desktop and tablet use for people making bookings?
Yes, tablet was really becoming all the rage when the iPad was launched, and it took some significant share from desktop. But what we've actually seen is that tablet share has moved back, so it's contracted, and the reason for that is that smartphones have got bigger. So roughly speaking, if we look at traffic, not bookings, we would be looking at 50% through mobile, 10% through tablet, 40% through desktop. So if any of your, desktop is actually the loser in all that. Less people are using desktops and booking and researching through desktop now.
Sorry, could you just repeat those statistics?
Yeah, 50% mobile, 10% tablet, 40% desktop.
Very good. Good. Well, Fergus has still not yet arrived, I don't think. Fergus, you're not online, I don't think, because I haven't let him in. So I have just had a note from, here we go. In the lobby, he says. Hold on a moment. Why am I not seeing you in the lobby? Just bear with me. There we are. Wasn't telling me. Right. Mark, thank you very much indeed for giving sharing all those insights with us. Do please let me have the deck, and we'll circulate that to everybody afterwards. And if anybody's got any further questions of Mark or wants to talk to Mark directly, just let me know and I'll very happily put you in touch directly. So thank you, Mark. Very, very much appreciated. Really interesting.
Pleasure.
And with perfect timing, gives me great pleasure to welcome back Fergus Ewing. Fergus, hotfoot from your cabinet meeting, no doubt. So thank you very much indeed for stepping out of it to come and join us once again this morning. Very, very much appreciated. I hope you're well.
I'm fine, thanks, Roddy. And yourself?
Yeah, very well. And a happy new year to you from all of us, I'm sure.
Well, the same to you.
Thank you. So I provided Jonathan with some questions in advance for you to perhaps sort of give a little bit of thought in your busy time to the sort of things which I'm sure we'd like to hear from you, but I'm sure you've got a much better idea than I have as to what you would like to share with us. So can I give you the floor, Fergus, and then maybe we'll come back with one or two specific questions thereafter, but perhaps you could just give us an update. There's obviously been there have been some interesting announcements or partial announcements coming out. I don't know whether you can put a bit more flesh on those bones, but let me hand over to you without further ado.
Well, thanks very much, Roddy, and it's good to meet yourself and your members again. As Tourism Minister, I'm acutely conscious that these are tough times, the toughest times that anyone can recall in tourism, leisure, hospitality, and at a time when, I think we all felt, certainly in the Scottish Government, that the offer of tourism in Scotland was ever increasing in quality, in profitability, in the extent to which it can provide a valuable career to young people, in all its aspects. And I think the gradual build-up of success of tourism was one of the really strong selling points for Scotland, actually, until COVID came along. And therefore, I think we all have to remember that we can win this back, and the challenge is the same as it was when we last met last year, namely to work together to beat off COVID and to see through financially the considerable challenges that many of your members face, very considerable. And I want to emphasize that as time goes on, financial challenges don't become less onerous, they become more difficult to overcome. Bills need to be paid, they need to continue to be paid, overheads need to continue to be met, even if a business is not trading. And as somebody who was in a small way in business in my own account in years past, you know, I am familiar with the responsibilities and I'm familiar with the predicament. And so I just wanted to express that sentiment. So we haven't had the start of the year that we would have wished for. COVID has made an unwelcome return, and the particular insight that we've had in government, certainly with access, Roddy, to the experts and the medical advice, is the new strain of the virus coming from South Africa, and the fact that this new strain is said to be around about 70% more infectious, and we've seen the consequences of that, particularly in England, where at times there has been the risk of the NHS services, beds and so on, becoming overwhelmed by the sheer weight of numbers, and that is a very real concern. And therefore, the advice that we all know, is to follow the COVID rules and precautions scrupulously. I think there's distinct feeling, and it was reflected, Roddy, in the cabinet discussion this morning, that, you know, this has been on for such a long time that it's human nature that perhaps we start to become a bit lax. We wash our hands perhaps a bit less frequently. We go out for a bit longer, and that there is perhaps a sense of fatigue. This, I think, is wrong, and we have to, all of us as individuals and as leaders of businesses, ensure that people remain vigilant, that we follow the basic social distancing, hand washing, wearing masks, and that we don't tolerate slippage. And it's up to us as individuals and as leaders to make sure that we do that. And why is that important? Because, as the First Minister said, that we are in a race really between the virus on the one hand and the vaccine on the other. The vaccine now, and 3 vaccines are available. I'm able to say that the Pfizer vaccine was administered as from December, and by Sunday, the 3rd of January, we expected 113,459 individuals to have had their first shot of the Pfizer vaccine. The Astra vaccine was started to be used on Monday, the 4th of January, Roddy, and plainly we will publish figures as they become available. And the vaccination program, in terms of prioritization, is following a set prioritization based on clinical need. And therefore, healthcare workers have begun vaccinating priority groups that would include care home residents and staff, those aged over 80, and health and social care workers. And we're approximately 2/3 of the way through the vaccination program for care home residents. Now, I do know that, you know, I think everybody feels that they have a case to be a priority. Teachers, those who provide individual personal care, perhaps on a private basis, going around people's homes, key workers of all sorts. But we have to work together and with the UK government to make sure the rollout of the vaccination is as swift and as effective as is possible. And it's terrific to see that light at the end of the tunnel. And it's also good to see that the vast majority of the population realise vaccination is a godsend and not something that one should be apprehensive about. I do see that there is hope as we begin the year, but for the foreseeable future, over the next weeks and I suspect months, we will see the continued need for vigilance. And really, the more vigilant we are now, I think the hope is that the earlier we can see resumption of something resembling normal trading. So it is pretty grim at the moment. I have to say things haven't been made easier because of the combination of COVID and Brexit. And I say that as the Secretary for Fishing and Farming. And, you know, while seed potatoes have been banned, we see seafood exports held back at the border and enormous problems with paperwork, which I think many of which could have been avoided if we had a period of grace or something. Therefore, the start of the year has been a pretty hectic one for me and will continue to be as we wrestle with these issues as well. But we very much hope that the immediate problems with Brexit will be sorted out. The question of international travel is one that weighs heavily on my mind. Without international travel, then tourism will be a shadow of what it was. And therefore, the announcement today of pre-departure testing by the UK government is something that which we learned about last week, and we're working on our own response to that. But obviously, Roddy, there's a need, I think, to have alignment across the UK in rules for international travel. So I believe we may make an announcement ourselves soon, and I don't want to preempt that, but obviously my voice is for alignment in these matters. And the sooner we have an internationally agreed method of reciprocal recognition of vaccination or negative testing, or a combination of both, the sooner we will be properly able to resume international travel, and the quicker, therefore, those of your members who are substantially or partly dependent on international visitors will have a realistic prospect of getting back in business. The last thing I wanted to say is that we're spending a huge amount of time on the financial packages of support. Without telling tales out of school, I think there is a need to simplify and clarify. We're working on one simple statement which sets out details of all the financial schemes available. There's a risk that these things become so complicated that even people like me at the heart of it are unable to answer specific questions. And therefore, we are today working on one document which will set out all of the information. Of course, we are making announcements fairly rapidly, and we have increased the support available, the grant finance available, quite substantially, as Kate Forbes announced yesterday. So, can you still hear me, Roddy?
Yes, absolutely.
I've lost my picture here, but that's not a drawback to me or probably anybody else. So I'll just carry on.
We can hear you.
I'm looking at a blank screen now, so I don't know what happened there. I don't know if your tech guys can help, but I'll just carry on anyway and just carry on audio. So I'm just coming to a conclusion, really, that the overall principles of financial support are that we cannot replicate lost revenue, but we do aim to aid survival of businesses that have been impacted by COVID. And of course, that's every business in hospitality. And that's why we have had the Hotel Fund with initial grant support, the Hotel Fund, the Pivotal Fund, and now additional financial support that has been announced yesterday by Kate Forbes. And we are working with the sector in many particular respects, like, weddings and ski resorts and tour operators and travel agents and so on and so forth, to provide bespoke help. The second point is that I'm acutely conscious, because every day I get emails of businesses falling through the cracks. And if any business is listening today, perhaps rather than discussing their affairs in public in front of 50 other people, they want to email me or my officials, then I undertake that we will look specifically at that. It may take a week or so to look into each individual case, but we want businesses to survive, and we want no business to fall through the cracks. Those are the two principles that apply here. The details are complicated, but we have to apply a principled approach and be consistent and reasonably fair across the board. And that's really what we're trying to do. I'm not really going to talk about recovery plan and long term now, because I think the short term issues might be the ones that are of most relevance at the moment. But obviously, I'm delighted to have this chance to engage with you again. And myself and my excellent team of officials in the Tourism Directorate and the Scottish Government are working extremely hard around the clock to tackle these matters, particularly the financial support issues at the moment. So thanks, Roddy, and I'll pass back to you.
Thank you very much, Fergus. I've got a couple of questions up my sleeve, as you would probably imagine, but there are also a couple coming into the chat box as well. Just on the subject of vaccines, the UK government has announced that all adults will have the vaccine by the autumn. Is this also the intention in Scotland?
Well, obviously, the intention is that the the vaccination program will be rolled out to everybody as quickly as possible. I did see that statement that I think Mr. Hancock issued. I don't think we have yet issued any similar statement. I think we're kind of concentrating on the here and now and the pragmatics and working to try to source supply and make logistical arrangements for the delivery of the vaccination program. But I'll take that point away and I'll feed it into the system and see whether the First Minister wants to make a similar type of announcement. I mean, one doesn't wish to make an announcement about what's going to happen in the future unless one has reasonable confidence that that in fact is what will happen. So we have to take care with these things, but obviously we also have to provide hope that there will be an end to the tunnel at some point, and so I'll take that point back.
Thank you, Fergus. Clearly we're in lockdown at the moment, and you know, we don't expect you with your crystal ball to be able to tell us when that will end. But I know that Glen Eagles have announced that they're planning to reopen on the 15th of March. I guess there's sort of two associated questions there, because clearly people on this call who have businesses need to plan. I mean, is that a reasonable kind of timeline for people to be working with at the moment, do you feel?
Well, I hope so, but I'm not really able to provide certainty on that, I'm afraid. To do so would be to go beyond what I can legitimately say at the moment. I mean, the facts are that the current restrictions we have indicated will remain in place until at least the end of this month. I personally would not be surprised if in the light of the numbers of cases and the infectious nature of the strain and the impact of the NHS, I wouldn't be surprised personally, this is a personal opinion, if the restrictions continue into February. Whether it will be possible to lift them by the beginning of March is something I couldn't really speculate at the moment. So what I can say is that, you know, as soon as we are able to give a clear steer to business, then we will do so. And also, I'm aware that businesses will need a period of time to restart, to rehire, to resume, to restock, to replenish, to clean. All of these things take a certain amount of time. So a period of notice is desirable. And I know the First Minister is acutely aware of that need for practicalities. But right at the moment, it is obviously for businesses to make an announcement and make a judgment, but I'm afraid I couldn't really guarantee anything in relation to being able to resume providing hospitality accommodation by the beginning of March, although I very much hope it will be possible so to do.
Okay, sort of linked to that, obviously the NHS sits at the heart of everybody's concerns. How close to the brink is the NHS in Scotland? I mean, we've heard sort of very worrying concerns from south of the border that, you know, parts of England are sort of teetering on the edge in terms of their ability to deal with the demands being placed on them. What's the situation in Scotland at the moment, Fergus?
Well, the Health Secretary this morning reported that there are some areas where there are high pressures on beds.
Are you making my cake? No, I'm making soup.
There are some areas where there are pressures, but not to the same extent as the pressures that we have seen reported down south. Although I believe it's the case, it was reported factually this morning with the Chief Medical Officer that the numbers in England and Wales have gone down slightly, which is encouraging news. But obviously, were we to see the NHS becoming overwhelmed, as it really has in some parts of England, or if we recall back in the early days of lockdown in Italy, where there were just desperate scenes of patients on trolleys and corridors not being able to get medical attention in the NHS there, the risks of overwhelming the NHS are real, and that's why obviously the restrictions in place are so important. And indeed, it's likely that there will have to be some tightening of restrictions, as has been reported in the press and discussed at Cabinet this morning. I'm not sure that these will affect hospitality because you're already shut down, so there's very little more that can be done in terms of restrictions, but in terms of people's personal lives and one or two particular areas, I think there will be further tightening of restrictions. And of course, the whole point of acting quickly, as the First Minister has done, is that the lessons show that only quick action can prevent the cases from rising. Waiting and prevaricating, delaying and dithering is not a good formula, we believe, for the best way to tackle the virus.
Thank you, Fergus. Turning more specifically to the hospitality sector, I mean, clearly, you know, the sector in the round has been battered over the last 12 months in particular. I mean, many businesses have probably only been able to, or will have only been able to trade for 3 months out of 18 months. I mean, there have been clearly lots of initiatives, support has been provided on various fronts. I mean, there are a number of specific support packages which it would just be interesting to know what the view is as to whether they're likely to be extended or not. I mean, the VAT relief, which as I understand it runs out tomorrow, I mean, is that likely to be extended?
Well, my information, Roddy, is that the reduced rate of VAT for certain hospitality and tourism supplies has been extended to 31st of March. So it's a UK decision, but the Treasury have assured Scottish Government officials that the reduction will be reviewed in March and may be extended after that. So I think that is reasonably positive news, although an extension to 31st of March isn't really very long. And I do think there's a case, given that it will take, even on the most optimistic prognosis, it will take some considerable time before businesses are able to return to anything like pre-COVID levels of training. Similarly, the furlough scheme has, of course, been extended twice actually. My view is the furlough scheme really does need to be in place as long as, for tourism at least, and hospitality in particular, until hospitality can resume. And the furlough has been a godsend where it is operated. So that's key. In terms of rates relief, I'm certainly pressing the case for further rates relief heading into next year, Roddy, because I cannot see how it would be possible to pay business rates for occupying property where you cannot trade from that property which you occupy. In relation to the specific grant support, I've referred to that, and that is continuing to provide support for businesses who cannot trade and also whose trade is restricted. That latter category is tier 3 areas, which now really only includes the Scottish Islands. So in most cases, the regular recurrent payments are payable to businesses who no longer cannot trade. And in addition, large businesses will be entitled to a grant of £25,000 in addition to that support. That's my understanding, though that doesn't apply to self-catering and bed and breakfast, for whom separate provision is being made. But I don't think that's the focus of your membership on this call. I mean, I've got the high-level stats here, Roddy, that 2.3 billion has been paid out in total, and many other stats and figures and percentages, but I'm not really going to go into that. I want to finish with the sentiment that we, the local authorities, are the delivery agents principally, but also the enterprise agencies. For example, the South of Scotland Enterprise Agency is coordinating the Weddings Fund, very important for some of your members, and I will be speaking to the Chair and Chief Executive of South of Scotland Enterprise in about an hour's time on this issue. And our aim is to administer these funds as swiftly as possible, consistent with the proper administration of public funds.
Thank you, Fergus. Just turning to the banks for a moment. A lot of people on the call have obviously taken out CBILS loans and bounce back loans, and we're fast approaching April when a lot of these businesses will will be expected to have to start paying back some of this money they've borrowed. But what's the government's message to the banks? I mean, my sense, having talked to a number of banks over the last week or two, is that they've kind of slightly gone into a bunker, and clients of ours who have been trying to get further CBILS support in particular have really just been turned down pretty much point blank. And what's the Scottish Government's message to the banks at the moment, as we approach what will be a critical time when sadly an awful lot of businesses without further relief are likely to fail?
Well, the CBILS assistance and the CL bills, the larger company schemes, have assisted many companies, and our message to the banks is to treat every business sympathetically and positively. However, you know, banks make their own decisions, Roddy. They are businesses, and it is really up to each bank to make its decisions. The CBILS and CL bills schemes and the bounce back loans are for the UK government. We haven't heard yet whether the UK government intend to extend such schemes beyond the end of March or extend the repayment holiday. I think there's a number of issues here that some businesses either will not be able to pay back or certainly won't pay the loans back, and this will then rapidly create two categories of those in default and those who are not in default. And those who pay back loans will, I imagine, not be very happy if businesses that don't pay back loans are, if you like, granted debt relief. So there are quite a number of complex issues that I think we need to be quite open and honest about. And I don't want to be political about this, because these ultimately are designed to help businesses. And I know from discussions with many businesses that they have actually provided a lifeline support, although others have been disinclined to accept new or take on new loan finance for various understandable reasons. I think there's particular concerns about the bounce back loans and the way in which they were paid out. There are suggestions that they've been paid out without much due diligence being carried out. So a certain amount of good luck may be required in recovering them. But I do think that there's a very strong case for adjusting the expected repayment period of these loans. And I think that that case is linked to the basic facts of businesses not being able to trade normally and therefore not being able to service additional loan debt. So I think the approach that I would certainly advocate we take is that we encourage the UK government to look at the repayment terms to allow flexibility, to allow more time, and to consider the need for further loan provision in some cases where necessary. Because like you, Roddy, in recent days I've heard from several businesses that they have been turned down for further loan provision.
Thank you, Fergus. Changing tack slightly, the various regional enterprise agencies such as Highlands and Islands Enterprise and Borders Enterprise, they're coming up to their year end and seem to be unclear as to the levels of funding they'll receive in their new financial year as of 1st of April. I mean, clearly these agencies are central to supporting the kickstart the hospitality and tourism sector when we emerge from the pandemic. Do you have any sense of whether they're likely to receive similar funding to that they received this year, or indeed more or less?
Well, as the minister responsible for Highlands and Islands and South of Scotland, but not Scottish Enterprise, that's Fiona Hislop, but I very much arguing for a rollover budget so that the budget is not reduced. I mean, this is going to be a time when we will need, in order to build an economic recovery, to be able to reach out and continue to support businesses, and the enterprise agencies are the main vehicle for doing that. So my argument in setting the budget has been that we cannot see a diminution of the budgets at these tough times. And indeed, I've argued that very strongly and will continue to do so in the budget discussions. There has been a delay, various delays in the timing of finalising budgets down south, which hasn't made Kate Forbes' task any easier. But I am tomorrow morning having a further bilateral with Kate Forbes about this, and I have been pressing very strongly and working very closely with her to ensure that the enterprise agencies are not underfunded. That said, Roddy, I mean, I think those on the call will be well aware that the sort of inverted commas normal inverted commas business of enterprise agencies is looking forward to supporting projects and investments in Scotland, many of which, particularly larger ones, take many years to come to fruition. And I think it's undoubtedly the case that, you know, as a matter of general comment, many of these projects have either been deferred or delayed, or in a few cases dropped. But I do think that the overall management of the budget will be something that we can do. And the last thing I would say is that, you know, I have emphasised to Russell Griggs and Alistair Dodds, the chairs of the two companies for which I have portfolio responsibility, that it's absolutely essential that they regard as a key function now and for the foreseeable future of continuing to provide COVID support. In other words, they should regard that as a key element of their job over the foreseeable future, rather than something that's just for the Scottish Government, because they are partners in delivery and they have staff who are working very, very hard to help administer some of the funding schemes.
Thank you, Fergus. There's a specific question here, which is the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund. Been recent announcements which are very welcome. This is from David Whiteford, who's chairman of North Highland Initiative, including two very important motorhome facilities on the NC 500. However, many important applications were not funded, he says. Is there any chance of more funding being found for this important scheme?
Well, yes, I very much hope there will be, and there is a lot of support for the RTIF, the Rural Tourism Infrastructure Fund, and we saw during the summer actually, and David and I discussed this a lot, and David is doing a lot to assist, as are those connected with the North Coast 500. We saw a lot of pressure points on single track roads, on basically the need for more and better facilities for camping, littering and toiletry functions, and therefore this is an issue that has many facets to it. Many people are involved in the public sector and the private sector, but the Rural Tourism Fund is the main way in which thus far we've been able to provide capital for relatively small projects which can make a big difference for assisting, you know, for example, the provision of facilities like AIRS, as they have in continental Europe in more numbers, for the camping of caravans and motorhomes near settlements, in order to ease some of the pressures related to that. The last thing I would say is that the RTIF is quite a popular fund with government, and I'm very hopeful that therefore I'll be able to persuade Kate Forbes that over the next, say, 3 years, that we will see increased funding available for RTIF. The funding at the moment has been, I think, 3 million a year, and that's relatively modest, and I think the demand in terms of projects far exceeds that. The last thing I say is that there are others, including Highlands and Isles Enterprise, who I think are interested in shouldering some of the burden in terms of the costs of some of these projects. But it is a conduit to easing many pressures that come with a busy domestic tourism market, which I hope we will continue to see this summer, well, this spring, I hope, and then this summer through to the rest of the year, particularly on basic facilities such as litter, toilets, and parking.
Fergus, thank you very much indeed. I'm conscious we're over time, and I'm sure your diary is not empty. So I think we need to let you go. But I just wanted to say in closing that we're all hugely appreciative. We do know that you do everything you possibly can for the hospitality and tourism sector in Scotland, and that I'm sure sometimes you're a bit of a lone voice in cabinet. So please keep battling for us and do whatever you can to secure whatever support you possibly can. I guess that my final plea would be that, and you have already touched on it, but that the more warning we can have as an industry in terms of when there are likely to be when there is likely to be a lifting of restrictions, the better. It helps so much. Trying to open a business with a week's notice is a nightmare for people, and they're all becoming quite adept at opening and closing businesses at the drop of a hat. But any warning that can be given or foresight would be hugely appreciative. But thank you so much, Fergus. Is it all right if I say to the group that if anybody has specific questions they would like me to pass on, that if they write to me, I'll pass them on to you? Are you comfortable with that? Because there were one or two specific questions which I didn't get to, but which I suspect people would like an answer to, if at all possible. Is that okay?
Of course, that's absolutely fine. Thanks, and thank you very much. And be happy to meet again in an appropriate after an appropriate period, hopefully with some better news. Thank you.
Fergus, thank you so much from us all. Very, very much appreciated. And you take care, and we'll look forward to hearing from you again. All the very best.
Thank
and
you.
Keep fighting the good fight for us. Thank you. I think that sort of brings us to a conclusion. The one thing I did just want to mention, which I'm sure most of you are aware of, was that there was the Minister for Hospitality debate in Westminster yesterday afternoon at 4:30. Early days, but it seems that the general feedback is that it was a very positive debate. Kate Nichols actually wrote to me personally and said that actually this is just very much first step in the journey. She and the A Seat at the Table campaign will be providing us with a further update once they've managed to sort of assimilate everything that came out of that debate, and we will of course pass that on. So please continue to support as requested. And to those of you or the many of you who I know wrote to your MPs, because I received a lot of notes from you saying that you had done so, a huge thank you, not just from me, but from the whole of the hospitality and leisure industry. So to you all, thank you very much indeed for your time today. I hope you got something out of the very insightful presentation from Mark Forrester and the political insight from our friend Fergus Ewing, MSP. So thank you again. Next week we have Andrew Sangster of Hotel Analyst, who is a font of interesting observation and understanding and knowledge about the sector and the state and its direction of travel. So I hope as many of you as possible will join us again next week for a very different sort of session. And in the meantime, as ever, stay safe, look after yourselves, and do get in touch if there's any way in which I or the hotel management company can be helping you. Thanks very much indeed. All the very best to you.
Thank you, Roddy.
That was very good today. Excellent.
Thank you, Charles. Well, as ever, a great pleasure to see you.
Good to see you too, John. God bless. Bye.
Bye, Charles.
Thank you very much, Roddy.
Great pleasure, Austin. I hope you enjoyed and got some value out of it.
Yeah, very good. I was interested with the time of day of people booking, because people used to book in their offices. And the thing is, if they're not in their offices anymore, then that's maybe where forcing things into mobile. It's about how people are interacting as opposed to what we're seeing. It's what's going on at their homes and what they're doing. So great stuff. Have a great one.
But I suspect these trends which are emerging now will only accelerate over the the months and years to come.
They'll stay the same. I mean, I've been using video conferencing for the last, since about 2013. Of course, it wasn't so good back then. But the thing is, now it's very natural for people to use it. So some of these things that are changing will stay, even though we may go back to whatever normality was before.
Indeed. Very nice to have seen you online, Austin.